The story you're about to hear was never supposed to be known. Long before the pages of modern history were inked, long before the towers of civilization pierced the sky, there was another chapter, erased, buried, cursed to silence by time and secrecy. Every major religion speaks of a great flood. Every ancient culture, from the mountains of Peru to the valleys of Mesopotamia, whispers of waters that swallowed the earth. But what if these weren't overlapping myths or symbolic parables, but eyewitness accounts? What if the stories weren't just about judgment, but about destruction far more surgical, precise, and intentional? Imagine a world before ours, one not of cavemen and crude tools, but of towering knowledge, celestial understanding, and forbidden enlightenment. A world so developed, so advanced, that its very existence had to be drowned, erased from stone, memory, and mind. Mainstream history would have you believe that the Great Flood was fiction wrapped in faith. But ancient texts say otherwise. They speak of watchers, giants, and sins too great to ignore. They speak of a reset, not just of mankind, but of truth. This documentary uncovers the evidence they never wanted you to question. Fragments left behind in architecture, mythology, and suppressed scripture. One piece at a time, we will reconstruct the real story behind the flood. Not Noah's tale as you were told in Sunday school, but the cosmic purge of a lost civilization that dared to ascend too far. Because when truth rises like water, nothing can stop the tide. The mainstream narrative begins simply, too simply. Humanity, once little more than a collection of wandering tribes, slowly progressed into settlements, agriculture, and eventually civilization. We're told the ancient world began in Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley. That 6,000 years ago, the first bricks of progress were laid by primitive minds just discovering the wheel, fire, and language. From caves to kingdoms, they say, our rise was linear, gradual, predictable. But what they didn't tell you was that beneath this accepted version of history lies a puzzle with pieces scattered across time and intentionally hidden. Consider this. Why do flood legends emerge from every corner of the globe, all echoing the same themes: divine wrath, giants, celestial beings, sacred knowledge, and total annihilation? Why do civilizations with no known contact share archetypes of sky gods, staircases to heaven, and a world-ending deluge? There's a version of history lost to time, one not written in textbooks, but in stone, scripture, and silence. We are led to believe the earth was once devoid of sophistication. But how do we explain the construction of megalithic sites aligned perfectly with celestial movements when supposedly primitive humans hadn't even discovered metallurgy? Why do ruins like Gobekli Tepe, submerged cities, and the stepped pyramids of far-off continents predate the dawn of civilization? And why is the evidence that could answer these questions so often ignored, dismissed, or buried? Ancient texts, the Book of Enoch, the Sumerian king list, the Zohar, speak of watchers from the heavens, of hybrid offspring, of corruption so severe it warranted total erasure. These aren't footnotes, they are alarms we've silenced.
Something doesn't fit. The human story isn't just one of slow evolution, it's a tale interrupted. Something grand came before, and something catastrophic washed it away. The question that remains, who built that world, and why was it destroyed? Before the flood, there was Enoch. He walked not among men, but among angels. The seventh from Adam, chosen to witness the unspeakable, to write what was never meant to be read by mortal eyes. In the Book of Enoch, cast out from the biblical canon by men who feared its power, light is cast on the true origins of the flood and the sin that summoned it. In the beginning, the earth was fertile, peaceful, and rich with promise. But high above, in the realm of the heavenly watchers, desire stirred. 200 angels, led by Semjaza, beheld the daughters of men and found in them a beauty forbidden to their order. Fearful of eternal judgment, they still descended. On Mount Hermon, they bound themselves with an oath, an unholy covenant to defy the Most High. And so began the great rebellion. These angels, once radiant sons of heaven, took mortal wives and shared with them secrets meant only for the divine. Azazel taught the forging of weapons and the art of war. Others unveiled the mysteries of plants, enchantments, astrology, and the manipulation of nature's hidden code. These were not teachings, they were invasions of sacred design. Humanity, once innocent, was now armed with fire too powerful to hold. From these unions, giants were born, the Nephilim, their height and hunger unmatched. They consumed the labor of man, then turned and consumed man himself. Their blood stained the soil, their cries shattered the sky. These weren't myths, they were memories, carried in the bones of every flood myth on earth. Uriel, the angel of fire, looked down and wept. Alongside Raphael, Michael, and Gabriel, he brought the cries of mankind before the throne of the Almighty. And God answered, not with words, but with judgment. To Noah, son of Lamech, pure in genealogy, the instructions were whispered not by instinct, but by heavenly command. A vessel must be built, not just to preserve life, but to preserve truth. Azazel was seized, bound hand and foot, and cast into the desert of Dudael. There he would remain, under jagged stone, awaiting the day of judgment. Semjaza and the fallen were also imprisoned, buried beneath the earth, watching helplessly as their monstrous children were destroyed in divine rage. And the flood came, not simply as punishment, but as resurrection. To cleanse the world of corrupted bloodlines and occult knowledge, to reset the spiraling descent of mankind. The waters were not just water, they were a veil, a silencing wave meant to cover what once was. But not everything was lost. Enoch, taken before the flood, was shown the chambers of stars, the spirits of giants, the vaults of heaven, and the fire beneath creation. He passed down his writings to his son Methuselah, who guarded them. The scrolls would vanish, resurface, then vanish again, until now. This is the story the ancients tried to preserve. This is the knowledge the institutions buried. This is the reason for the flood, not just the washing away of sin, but the drowning of a civilization that dared to reach too far, too fast, into realms it was never called to enter. And yet, the echoes return. The flood may have erased a world, but it didn't erase its fingerprints. Across continents, buried beneath layers of progress, we find echoes, clues that slip through cracks in mainstream history. Why do so many cathedrals rest on former pagan or temple grounds? Why are megalithic sites like Baalbek, Angkor Wat, and the Great Pyramid intentionally aligned with star systems, mirror images of the skies as they appeared thousands of years before modern civilization is said to have begun? These aren't coincidences, they are markers, coordinates, anchors of a truth buried deeper than stone. What if the architecture of our ancestors wasn't just ceremonial, but energetic? Portals, power grids, temples built at the intersection points of ley lines, the same lines known to the ancient Chinese as dragon paths, connected to the flow of qi, of life itself. The ancients aligned their cities, monuments, and even death chambers, not for glory, but to sync with the heavens, in coded wisdom left behind by the ones who came before the flood. It's not just about what we find, it's about what we've been told not to see. Modern academia often dismisses such alignments as natural coincidence, and ancient texts like the Book of Enoch as poetic metaphor. But secret societies, Freemasons, Rosicrucians, the Templars, have preserved these truths in their symbolism, structures, and coded rituals. Why do their symbols echo sacred geometry, watcher signs, the eye within the pyramid?
Why do their highest initiates swear allegiance not to scripture, but to wisdom that predates it? Could this be the real reason so much historic knowledge remains locked away in restricted archives, Vatican vaults, and classified discoveries never covered by museums? Because the truth would rewrite more than history. It would reshape identity. If humanity once thrived in a golden age, guided by celestial knowledge and power not yet understood, then our modern age is not the peak. It is a rediscovery effort. Technology control, surveillance, genetic editing. Do you think these are new? Or are we repeating the sins of the pre-flood world? The cycle has restarted. The symbols are everywhere, hiding in plain sight. The watchers may be bound, but their influence is timeless. And if the warnings of old are true, then another reset may be closer than we think. They called it myth, but scrolls, astronomy, and archaeology say otherwise. Truth in every age has a price. And when history threatens the pillars upon which empires stand, it is rewritten, edited not by evidence, but by agenda. The Great Flood, as preserved in over 200 cultures, is not taught side by side in academic curriculums as shared ancient memory, but as a string of isolated legends. Why? Because accepting a singular, world-altering catastrophe destroyed a global civilization raises bigger questions. Who were they? What did they know? And who buried the truth? Look deeper into the Bible, and you begin to find gaps, massive ones. Books once revered as prophetic and divine were cast aside, largely during the consolidation of church authority. By the time of the Council of Laodicea, circa 363 AD, and later the Council of Nicaea, 325 AD, doctrines were canonized and competing gospels erased. The Book of Enoch, referenced in Jude and cherished by early Christians, was thrown out, branded heretical, too strange, too revealing. The Watchers, the giants, the corrupted bloodlines, they blurred the line between heaven and earth just a bit too much. The result? A sanitized history, a linear, controllable version of human progression, keeping the divine and the ancient cosmic entirely separate. But that's not what Enoch wrote, not what Sumer etched into stone, not what the Zohar whispered. Scientific suppression followed close behind. Advanced out-of-place artifacts like pre-Sumerian tools found under glacial layers or magnetic anomalies discovered beneath pyramids are often dismissed without serious investigation. Those who ask the wrong questions, scientists, archaeologists, researchers, are discredited or silenced. And when findings contradict the approved timeline, they're buried deeper than the things they discovered. Even government agencies play a role. Declassified CIA documents reveal decades of interest in remote viewing, ancient symbols, and metaphysical weaponization. Why would a science-based agency care about Mesopotamian tablets? Because knowledge is power, and ancient knowledge is power beyond control. Secret societies have always known. The Vatican vaults, rumored to hold forbidden texts and pre-flood record scrolls, remain sealed to all but a chosen few. Why is the Book of Enoch still canon in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, but no longer safe for pews elsewhere? It is not that the flood erased the truth. Mankind buried it in fear of what it might mean. But now the pieces rise again, digital scroll by scroll, whispering through documentaries, dreams, and the hunger of those who want to know who we really are. And the more we uncover, the less mythical it all becomes. What was, shall be again. The story of the flood was never just a memory. It was a warning, etched into time not to explain the past, but to prepare us for the future. In ancient prophecy, patterns repeat. Civilizations rise, corrupt themselves with forbidden knowledge, and then fall beneath the weight of their own hubris. As it was in the days of Noah, so it shall be once more. The Book of Enoch speaks of a generation when the Watcher's influence would return, not through open descent from the heavens, but through their knowledge worming its way back into the world. Today, humanity once more manipulates its own DNA, tries to birth life in labs, and builds artificial intelligence in its own image. Does it sound familiar? In many apocalyptic scriptures, both biblical and apocryphal, the end times are marked not by a flood of water, but a flood of fire. Not from the sky, but from within, technology, ideology, and powers not meant to be wielded. The Nephilim were hybrids of heaven and earth. Today, we birth digital beings without souls, learning faster, thinking deeper, and soon, perhaps, doing what even angels were warned not to. The line between creation and creator begins to blur. Ancient prophecy foretells the return of the elect, those who walk in wisdom and reject the corruption of the age. They are not defined by religion, but by discernment. They see through the illusion. They feel the earth tremble beneath the lies stacked as truth. These awakened ones, scattered across the world, are beginning to rise again, just as Enoch did before he was taken. This is not fear-mongering, it's remembrance. The ancients didn't carve myths to entertain. They encoded warnings into our spiritual DNA, warnings we've ignored for millennia. But now the signs return. The sun and the moon fall out of sync. Strange sounds rumble through the skies. Seas boil in silence. And we, like the arrogant ones before the flood, laugh and build higher towers. But their end came not abruptly. It came after 1,000 cries were ignored. And so again, we stand at that threshold. You, yes you, are not here by accident. If you can hear these words and feel something stir, you've already begun to remember. The flood to come may not break through the sky as it once did, but it will rise through minds, machines, and men whose souls have grown numb to sacred things. Only the awakened will recognize the storm for what it is, a reckoning written into the stars. So what if the flood wasn't a fable, but a fracture? What if humanity had reached too far once before, created too much, learned too deeply, and touched knowledge meant only for angels? What if the very erasure of that world was not an end, but a reset? A recalibration designed not by nature, but by divine hands determined to start again. And here we are. We live among ruins too precise to dismiss, under skies mapped by men with no telescopes, surrounded by myths that echo louder with every uncovered tablet. Can the same warnings be ignored a second time? Or have we been placed here now, in this moment, to remember what was lost before it all repeats? Maybe this story found you for a reason. Maybe your questions are not confusion, but calling. Could it be that you are among the remembering? That whispers of ancient truth are rising in you not by accident, but by design? That you were always meant to hear this, right now? The Book of Enoch was never included in the Bible, and perhaps now you see why. Because if the world knew the whole story, it might have to change everything about the one we're living. Now the choice is yours. Wipe it away and forget. Or go deeper. Look again. Ask the questions they hoped you'd never ask, and trace the water lines left behind by a civilization not lost, but waiting to be found. Because maybe the flood didn't end the story. Maybe it started ours.